There's an odd feeling in the air here, and it's not from the distinctive aroma of the millions of old documents stored in the building since the early 1960s. What's going on is that historians and genealogists who've been coming here for years, and people who have never visited before, have heard the news that the federal government wants to shut it down and move everything inside to California.
These are some of our earlier records. These are from the General Land Office, but they show the various Indian agencies and the allotments. This particular one is for the Puyallup and Muckleshoot Indian reservations. But I love these old maps because they did so much more than just draw lines.
Sue Karen is director of the federal facility, home to documents, photos, and one-of-a-kind maps, like this one from 1856, signed by the first governor of Washington Territory.
These are the originals. Isaac Stevens' signature on it. This is the record that everything's based on.
The looming closure and sale of the building stem from 2016 legislation intended to identify underutilized federal property for fast-track disposal. But elected officials in the 4 states the facility serves, Washington, Oregon, Idaho, and Alaska, say there should have been a public process. Patty Murray, Maria Cantwell, and other senators have asked the White House to reverse the decision. There's one group who depends on the facility and what's inside more than any other: Native Americans. Their lives were radically disrupted by the arrival of Europeans in the 19th century. The archives in Seattle constitute some of the earliest written records of indigenous culture in what's now Washington, Oregon, Idaho, and Alaska. This is, in a way, the DNA for Native life, good and bad, in what became the United States.
This is the Register of Indian Families from the Puyallup Consolidated Agency. This is from 1902. And here you have just a register of the Indian families. You have, in some cases, the Indian name. People using these or looking at these registers, they're using them to document that the Bureau of Indian Affairs saw them as being a Puyallup Indian at this time.
In the months they were considering closure of the Seattle facility, the federal government didn't consult with any of the 272 tribes in the 4 states.
I think they dropped the ball. There's such a huge impact of this decision without consulting those who are affected. This affects not just tribes. This affects every citizen in Washington, Oregon, Idaho, Alaska. All these folks have their history stored here.
In February, National Archives officials from Washington, D.C. visited Seattle. They invited a small group of tribes to Sandpoint to discuss the closure and the plan to move materials to California. But no one from the national office would talk to us on camera about the closure, or about the lack of public process, or talking to tribes like this before the decision was made.
Well, I'm glad you guys are here.
Demonstrators outside made their feelings very clear.
My ancestors are in here. Please don't take them away from me.
When the meeting was over, some tribal representatives were skeptical about promises made by the D.C. officials.
I hate to say it, but it's 165 years later after the treaty signing, things were promised by the federal government, and like the hospital and a school, and it took many years. So it is my feeling that it'll be the same process again.
Archival documents, the actual original paper, not just digital copies, means something more to Brandon REYNON.
And be able to see, capture in that document the feelings that our ancestors must have felt. You're not going to get that when you're looking at a digital copy. You're not going to get that when you're looking at a computer screen.
And most of what's preserved in Seattle has not been digitized, including burial records for the old Cushman Indian School in Pierce County.
I have a voicemail that came in today from somebody that's a Tlingit, and they're wanting to get information on who's buried here from Cushman. And that information is up at Sandpoint. Alaska doesn't have access to those records anymore because all of those records were moved down here. So we act as a resource. They reach out to us, and we're able to give them that information so that they know where their ancestors are.
And there's so much more irreplaceable tribal material in Seattle's vast and diverse holdings.
These are also some of our older documents. This is from the Tulalip Indian Reservation, and as you can see, they are in some cases very faded.
Irrigation maps from the Yakima Reservation in eastern Washington. a written tribal history from Umatilla, Oregon, and even photos of the baseball team at Metlakatla, Alaska. What happens if all this goes to California?
It might be hard for non-natives to understand, but there's a spirit that comes with their words in paper, their artifacts that are still attached, that we can still feel, that we still understand, that we can have that connection. And you move that stuff away, we lose that ability to feel that connection.
Washington Attorney General Bob Ferguson and other officials are exploring ways to keep the facility open. Amber Taylor is optimistic some kind of solution will be found.
I think there's a lot of good people on our side. I think that there's a lot of people that are willing to stand with us, and we've been known to take action. So, like I said, we persevere. So, you know, I'm very hopeful. I'm very hopeful.
Watch CityStream Thursday nights at 7.